Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Hello. November 14th, 2004. It's midday. The sea is calm and the sky is blue and free of clouds as Carrier Strike Group 11 conducts training exercises approximately 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. The guided missile cruiser USS Princeton has been tracking mysterious airborne contacts for weeks. Again, contact at 80,000 feet, plunging to hover around 20,000 feet, only to disappear from the ship's incredibly powerful cutting-edge AN Spy 1B radar system. This day would be different, however, as an operations officer aboard Princeton would radio a nearby Grumman E-2 Hawkeye AWACS aircraft to try to actively track the unknown contact. When the Hawkeye's powerful onboard radar could only register a faint, untrackable signature from the contact, the operations officer hailed two FA-18F Super Hornets conducting training nearby and asked them to disengage the training exercise to investigate the contact. The officer vectored the aircraft to the last known point of contact and asked if they had live active weapon systems. Upon arrival at the location, the aircraft did not initially identify any airborne contacts, but did notice something very unusual. There was a large oval-shaped area of the sea, about the size of a jumbo jet, where there was a noticeable turbulence in the waves, as if the waves were breaking over something on the surface of the ocean. Within moments, the aircraft suddenly made contact with an object hovering 50 feet above the water. The object was roughly the shape of a tic-tac, about 30 to 45 feet long, and making erratic movements. Commander David Fravor, commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, skillfully maneuvered his state-of-the-art aircraft into a circular descent pattern in an attempt to investigate and track the object. The unknown contact made incredible maneuvers that even the highly trained aviator could not match in his cutting-edge aircraft. The contact ascended along a difficult circular path in opposition to the FA-18. When Commander Fravor tried to counter and put his aircraft in a position to track the object again, the unknown contact zipped away at tremendous speed. A few minutes later, the Princeton had made contact again, but this time the object was over 60 miles away. It had traveled the distance at speeds greater than Mach 3, or at least roughly twice the top operational speed of the FA-18s. The occurrence left both pilots and their weapons systems operators freaked out. The opening scene for the latest sci-fi film, hardly. Just one of the occurrences brought to light recently with the DoD's admittance and partial declassification of its advanced aerospace threat identification program. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a very special broadcast for you. My name is Mike Richburg. I want to immediately go ahead and bring in my esteemed colleague and co-host, Mr. Adam Davis. Adam, how are you this evening?
Very good. I'm looking forward to the show and grilling our special guest tonight, yeah.
Well, I'm very excited, too. It's certainly a subject matter that's near and dear to myself and been a big fan all my life of the subject, actually, and not much of a researcher, but definitely, one of those that has a tremendous amount of interest in that area. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to have the privilege tonight and the honor of introducing a very special guest. Mr. Michael Huntington is a UFO researcher and freelance paranormal travel writer. Michael, how are you this evening?
I am good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. We're doing great. Well, let's get right to this thing, Michael. Now, I'm not a smart man, but you're pretty sharp, and I know you've been a UFO researcher for many, many years. And a lot of us folks are of the mind that we're pretty much, since December 16th of last year, when the New York Times broke an expose on this subject of the AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, we're quite convinced that the government knows a lot more than we know, and we're not sure what they know exactly, but they know something, and now they've admitted it. Can you tell us a little bit about exactly what is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and when it began, and what is it all about, Michael?
Well, let's first sort of define what the term disclosure means, because that the title of your show is Brink of Disclosure, and disclosure traditionally within the UFO world, at least within the past maybe 30 years, has suggested that certainly the government does know more about the subject than they're saying, and I think at least on some level that's probably undeniable, because we're dealing with military intelligence, and we're dealing with branches of the military that serve the country's defense, identifying threats, or developing new technologies. So there has always been a secrecy aspect. There's always been some sort of government involvement in the subject, going all the way back to 1947 and throughout the history of the subject. The government has investigated UFOs under different organizations. There was of course, Sign and Grudge and Blue Book, going from the 50s throughout the 60s. And there's always been rumors that although the government said that they had gotten out of the UFO business in 1969 following the publication of the University of Colorado Condon Committee report, which suggested to the military that there was really nothing to the subject, everybody has sort of had this idea, and some researchers have even had inside people suggesting to them that at least some departmentalized government program has always persisted because it does relate to national security.
Michael, can I just ask you a question? I'm fascinated by the term inside people. So are you basically suggesting that there has always been some people, some intelligence members of the community, the military or whatever, who have been looking into this slyly?
Yeah, it depends on which researchers you look at and which stories are more credible than others. But it would make sense, and you would certainly expect that if there are things flying around, that at least some branch of the of intelligence, or NORAD or somebody, would be looking at unidentified aircraft, unidentified threats, or even anomalous phenomena that could affect security. And that sort of is the basic aspect of disclosure. Disclosure being the idea that one day they're all going to come clean with what they know. Now, there's different interpretations as to what that means. Some of them are more conspiratorial. Some people, expect a disclosure of Roswell, or, even in some levels, people expect, science fiction type disclosures of, secret space programs and intergalactic wars. But I think what people now have sort of come to expect is that there would be forms of soft disclosure. In other words, little small releases of information that would acclimatize the public to the reality of extraterrestrial visitation, perhaps, or at least acceptance of
let's break that down a little bit. Okay, let's break that down a little bit, if we may. So, when we talk about disclosure of departments, is there any, given your expertise, is there any single branch of the military which may have more information than others, say the Navy and the Air Force, or are they better? And do these departments necessarily talk to one another? Because they don't always share intelligence, do they? What's your opinion on that?
Well, you're dealing with alphabet organizations over multiple decades, and, people have different classifications, and there's different projects that, are either more open than others. So there is that issue as to who's actually doing the investigating. Throughout the history of the subject, pretty much every military branch's intelligence apparatus has had some connection to the subject. Certainly the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the Office of Naval Intelligence. I think what we're seeing now, especially with, the recent disclosures, and I use that with a small b, we at least have seen a little more of an umbrella sort of collection within the Department of Intelligence, the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which it's supposed to interact between all the different defense departments, but what that interaction is, what programs are still compartmentalized within different departments. It's hard to determine. And also, traditionally, the UFO community has been distrustful of these intelligence groups because they, have engaged in disinformation and misinformation. So it's hard to glean what's true, what's not, what's a false program, what's a misdirection. So, absence of any sort of big disclosure, by like the president, we sort of have to hope for these little disclosures and good researchers going through, the paperwork through the Freedom of Information Act to try to find out what's going on. And, that's at the heart of it. I think a lot of people are looking for disclosure, but, they're also looking for confirmation. That there's something there, that the government has been involved in looking into this, and maybe they've been obfuscating, somewhat. So it's sort of a mixed up bag, sort of a messy basket of trying to go through all of this exopolitical intelligence intrigue, that has been with this subject for 75 years.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, when we talk about that intrigue, one of the things that I noticed, and I'm quite happy to be wrong, you're the guy who knows about it, but I've noticed when we talk about soft disclosure that there seems to have been a cultural shift, not just in the United States. Obviously, I'm not from the United States. I'm from Great Britain, as you can tell. But there's been a cultural shift. So, for example, one of the things I was very interested in recently was the Vatican coming out, basically the Pope's official spokesman on these matters, saying, well, we have no problem with the idea of there being alien life, and leaders of other religions also saying we have no problems of there being alien life. Do you think there's been when we talk about soft disclosure, and obviously this is an abstract question, but would you be surprised if nations had not talked to one another, friendly nations, about the possibility of releasing information and how they should go about it?
Well, I think at least on some levels, amongst allies, there has been discussion of unknown aerial threats. And there certainly, should have been, especially during the Cold War. An unknown threat could, trigger a nuclear war. So there certainly was, I think, at least some sort of, discussion as to, regardless of what the origin of the phenomena was, any sort of thing that could threaten the likelihood of war. I think there has been discussions of that. Whether or not there's been a concerted effort to acclimatize the public, that's open to debate. I think culturally, we have on our own been moving in that direction. As the culture becomes more, influenced by science fiction. As science fiction becomes, science fact, we're more open to the ideas, and science is bearing this out too, as we get better technology to look at the universe, that the probability and the likelihood of extraterrestrials or even, different dimensional beings or whatever, the likelihood is increasing. Now, whether or not they're actually visiting, I think, even the hard skeptic would concede that they're probably out there, but it's an open question as to whether or not they're visiting. But certainly you're
Yeah, I mean, again, I just want to, so we can break that down for people. I've noticed that there's been a scientific shift as well, because you touched on the technology, and I want to come on to that later. But, I think only 20 years ago, the idea of physicists talking about alien life would have been ridiculed. Now, even very respected physicists talk about the idea of the fact that there not being alien life is extremely unlikely. And of course, you have things like the Fermi paradox and extrapolating from there. I mean, so that people can understand. Would it be possible to explain a little bit about just how vast the universe is and how likely life might be to exist?
Well, yeah. For much of the 20th century, we were sort of looking at life on other planets through, different probability mechanisms, denoting how many stars there are and how many planets and the likelihood of different civilizations. And as we have developed the technology to see that most likely, most stars probably have planets, multiple planets, so the likelihood is increasing that they're out there. And yes, you are dealing with vast distances, but new science is also suggesting that, there's ways to get around, those vast distances, and there could possibly be interdimensional aspects. So I think as science, mainstream science, plays with these ideas of the universe teeming with life, and you do have the Fermi's paradox of why aren't we seeing life everywhere? Maybe we just haven't identified it yet, or maybe there's some sort of prime directive where they can mask their presence from lesser civilizations. Maybe they communicate in a different way, or maybe you reach a point to where you don't need to communicate, across the vast distances, especially if you can go there instantaneously. There's no need to send radio signals out. So it's an open question. Science is certainly, the generation of astrophysicists that are coming up now have grown up, watching Star Wars and reading science fiction books, and are more accepting of the idea of aliens. And, they've sort of moved away from that Judeo-Christian viewpoint of the Earth being at the center of the universe, and a God only creating, life here. Even the Vatican, I think, as you have said earlier, is open to, the notion of people being, well, I say people, but beings, entities, intelligences being out there. Other than
good stuff. So Mike has a question he wants to put.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in real quick. Actually, you brought up so many good points. I want to get back to the cultural acceptance and possibly conditioning, which is a very interesting topic. But quickly, I want to just put something you said in perspective. Over the last just a few decades, our level of understanding as a human race has grown exponentially through science. For example, and related to what we're talking about, and just not too many years ago, we actually thought that there were maybe several thousand planets around, in the Milky Way. Now we realize there are billions of planets in our own galaxy, in a universe with billions of galaxies, just to put that in perspective for you. And another very interesting thing that I thought you brought up was the thing about propulsion and travel and things like that. Through higher science now, we have an understanding that everything's not all about, how much horsepower you can put on something to go fast. It's more to do with a different way of moving. And those are things we're just now starting to understand. And it's very reasonable, I would imagine, to maybe assume that if there's extraterrestrial life out there in that vast universe, and most certainly it is, wouldn't it? I mean, some of those civilizations out there would certainly be much more advanced than we are and have a greater understanding of those types of things. So that's something that's a good point you made. We have to keep in mind. Their level of understanding of travel through the universe and things like that could be much higher than our own.
Michael, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility, and here we are all conjecturing. The probability does show that, as Rich said, correctly, that we're dealing with multiple billions of planets, more so than just decades ago we thought were possible. I think on average now, each star that you look up and see in the night sky probably has at least 4 planets. And a good chunk of those out of each of those planets could have some sort of life. And given enough time, it could have advanced some sort of technology. Because that's really what we're speaking about.
Let's get down to some specifics. If I may, Michael, let's get down to some specifics because I'm interested in. We touched on the technology point. So, we've set the scene that there may be some cultural shift. We've set the scene that, obviously the physics supports the idea of intelligent life in the universe. The question is, has it contacted or not? Do you know of any technologies which people might be aware of which have been rumored to have been introduced as a result of contact with extraterrestrials? Is there anything that you could point to as a possibility?
Well, yes, certainly. First, say as we exit that portion, assumptions does not necessarily, assume verification. The likelihood of civilizations out there does not necessarily necessitate that they're interested in us. We might just be some backwater anthill, that they're really not interested in. Or maybe they are interested and they have been visiting. Throughout the UFO lore, there have been a number of, stories going from Roswell up to Bob Lazar that have suggested that there have been visitors, from elsewhere, and I'll just say elsewhere, and they have left technology, either on accident or on purpose, and we have had access to that. Maybe something crashed at Roswell that was extraterrestrial, and the military intelligence apparatus has been able to utilize some of that technology, reverse engineer it, as UFO lore has suggested, or has had a number of different craft that they have collected over the years. As Bob Lazar suggested, was the case at Area 51. Specifically the S4 area of Area 51, that we have had access to multiple craft, and we have tried to reverse engineer these craft successfully in some ways, and maybe even some UFOs that are flying around are ours, but reverse engineered. So all of this technology suggests, if you do accept the accounts, the lore on face value, that we're dealing with some sort of anti-gravitic technology, some sort of craft that can defy the law of physics by creating, its own sort of bubble around gravity, so it avoids, things like inertia, and it can excel at different speeds or go instantaneously. This is all speculation, that extends from folklore, so it hasn't been really proven, but it's on the table just as much as any other theory. Are all UFOs craft? No, I think most stuff that people see are misidentifications, probably some military craft. I think there's unknown atmospheric phenomena out there that we still need to identify. I think actual UFO, in the sense of like a flying saucer or something of that like, I think if it is the case, it's probably a small portion of what people are seeing. Most of the stuff you see online with all those videos are fake.
Michael, Michael, can I just interrupt a second, because I want to break down, because you raised a number of points, and I just want to go back, if I may, a little bit. So you mentioned Bob Lazar earlier on. Now, he really intrigues me, because he claimed to have worked at S4, which, as my understanding is a place in Nevada, and he claimed to have military tip clearance and worked on UFO aircraft. Is that correct? And if so, what do you think of him? Do you think he's credible or not credible?
Well, Bob Lazar came to the forefront in the early 90s, largely being discovered, I guess you could say, by reporter George Knapp, who was one of the first guys to investigate Area 51 and, sort of look into that, it being in his backyard. So Area 51 does exist, and it is there, and it does, test and has tested experimental aircraft. Bob Lazar's story is that he was a contractor that worked at S4, which is, a little bit south of Area 51, and that's where they kept the flying saucers. Now, as with any account where it's a story where you don't have any other evidence than the account, you have to look into the background. And it's sort of an open question as to whether or not he's credible. I think there's evidence to suggest that what he's saying is the truth. I think there's other questions that have not been answered. He is certainly still a timely subject within this subject. I think there's an autobiography is coming out this year by him through Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy, the same people that released these 8-tip videos, and Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp's protege, is finishing up his Bob Lazar documentary. So we'll be able to hear more. Apparently he's got more to his story, and there's a lot of questions that people still have relative to his credibility. So as Stanton Friedman would say, the noted ufologist, he's sort of in my gray basket for me.
What's your gut
there's always that.
What's your gut instinct though, Mike? If you had to percentage, is he 50-50, 60-40, 70-30? I'm very interested in someone who's got your level of expertise, giving me how likely you think he might be to be credible or not.
Well, he's in my gray basket, and that's not a 50-50 gray basket. There's some things that I really have questions about. I'm probably more 70-30. What does benefit him is that, and I've never met the guy, people that have talked to him, researchers say that his story has not changed. He has not tried to capitalize on his story any. He has not made, nary a dollar off of his story, supposedly. And you have to ask yourself, why would somebody put themselves through all this if they're making it up, Yeah. But then again, he can't back up a lot of what he's saying because supposedly, according to him, his background has been erased by intelligence, so we get into that exopolitical intrigue again. We'll see how it goes.
Didn't he have, there's one point I wanted to ask you, didn't he have, because he said his background was erased and people poo-pooed that and said, oh, well, he must not be telling the truth. But didn't they find him actually listed in a phone book for S4?
Well, yeah. It wasn't S4. It was a phone book for Los Alamos, and okay. It had him as an engineer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that his story is necessarily true. He may have been a janitor. I don't know. The reason I thought
that was interesting was that they all denied that he'd ever worked there, but in fact they didn't. They missed a bit, and he was actually working as an engineer in Los Alamos, which they'd actually denied. So I think it's an interesting story, really.
Yeah, I think the big thing, the big negative thing is his supposed, academic background. There's nobody that. No professors remember having him, or there's no record of him going to the schools that he said he went to, and no classmates that have come forward. So there's still a lot of questions. There's things that the government can't scrub. They might be able to scrub your records, but they're not going to be able to scrub your roommate.
Absolutely. No. It's interesting. I want to see how this unfolds. Well, do keep us updated as to when are these interviews with people pursuing this story? When are these likely to come out? The Bob Lazar story. Well,
Jeremy's story, Lazar documentary. I think he's done a short version. He's doing a longer version. I think it comes out this summer. And Jeremy Corbell is a great director. He's got Patient 17 on Netflix right now if you want to see his style of investigative journalism. And he's George Knapp's protege, so he has access to, all the stuff that George Knapp had. And the Lazar autobiography is coming, through Tom DeLonge's group. And those guys notoriously, are not... They usually say something's coming out, and it's usually delayed. So who knows? But I anticipate sometime this year we'll find out more stuff relative to Lazar.
Good stuff. Now, you mentioned earlier on when we were talking, and you mentioned it again when you're talking to Mike. I'm very interested in. You mentioned that researchers disclosing information as a result of inquiries through the Freedom of Information Act. Can you point to something that you think might be quite pertinent, which people have been able to uncover, which researchers like yourself have been able to uncover? Because I think that would be very useful for our listeners to show the validity of research of people like you and what contribution you made.
Well, I'm going to say that I can't point to one single document. I think if you're looking at one document, I think you could probably look at the FBI memorandum, by J. Edgar Hoover, which has his signature on it, which could be relative to Roswell. But I would have to say that just the mountain of information out there through the Freedom of Information Act that has been retrieved, and knowing that mountain of information, there's researchers out there like, Paul Dean and John Greenwald, those guys that have gotten hundreds of thousands of documents, and some of them are, just unknowns that are sort of, just in that unknown basket, and, they could be a lot of different things, including atmospheric, but just knowing that there is that much information out there, and that there is still that much left uncovered, that is classified through, national security. I think that speaks volumes in itself. I would recommend going to like the Black Vault if you want to see these documents. Certainly some of them are, like Russian satellites that have come down, or Chinese satellites, and, things that you would expect our air intelligence organizations to keep track of. But, there are some real unknowns there, too, that people should be aware of, and it does suggest that it is perhaps some sort of phenomena just beyond the mundane.
Okay, so could you explain, just going to specifics, because I was a lawyer, as you might tell, so I love specifics. When you talk about the J. Edgar Hoover document, which may relate to Roswell, a lot of people won't know about that. Could you explain that for us, Michael?
Well, there's a FBI memorandum from that has J. Edgar Hoover's signature on it that appears to be, an accurate document that is speaking of FBI access to some sort of object or even disks. Now, it's sort of open as to what he's referring to. Some people have suggested because, the term disk was used, that it was relative to, maybe a crash in Roswell, or maybe a crash in, Cape Girardeau, where I'm at here. Supposedly a saucer crashed here in 1941. Some people even suggest it could be whatever was shot at over the Los Angeles skies during, the famous Battle of L.A. right at the onset of World War II. So it's sort of open to interpretation, but it does definitely speak to J. Edgar Hoover trying to get access to something that was downed, and from what researchers who have looked into it, it appears to be a genuine document, and so worth looking at. I think if you type that up, or visit like the Black Vault where a lot of this stuff is, you'll be able to see some of these documents and others. There's a lot of top 10 lists out there, best documents too. So I do encourage people to look at these and consider these on their own.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a good point. Thank you very much. Now when we look at present day disclosure, so in the trailer that Mike sent round about the show, we showed this F-16 fighter, and we talked right at the start of the show about the government program, and the government was spending openly disclosed through that they spent $22 million investigating the idea of UFOs very recently, and the senator who introduced it said he was very proud of it. Why do you think? Because that what you basically see in that footage, again, to the best of my and I've no connection with the Air Force, but to the best of my knowledge, is the fighter sort of tracks the movement of a very rapidly moving object, and the pilots are clearly shocked by it, and they can't explain it. And it's traveling, I think, just above the sea. What do you think? What I was interested in that was, we'll never really know what it is, but what do you think the motivation was from those in the defence community who released that to the public? Why would they release that, do you think? That's what I'm interested in, Mike.
Well, we're sort of getting into the heart of the debate that's going on within ufology right now, relative to what this means, whether or not these sources are credible, what their connections are to each other, and the military intelligence, and is there an agenda, What we're seeing is all of this has come about as a result of rock star Tom DeLonge, formerly of Blink 182, his creation of an organization called To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, which is an organization that he developed, over the past year or so. Mr. DeLonge has been interested in this subject for a while. He is certainly, as a wealthy celebrity, has gotten a lot of access to people within the political community that most researchers don't, and he's sort of always been a nerd for this topic, and he has developed entertainment projects over the past few years, and has tried to promote some sort of acclimatization through media, by mixing reality and whatever that means, and science fiction in order to serve the subject to the public in ways that is more palpable, as opposed to just some sort of hammering disclosure over the head. It's still open for debate as to the sources that this information has come from. Tom DeLonge's panel on To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science is comprised mostly of people tied to the military intelligence community. So there's always going to be that trepidation within ufology of, there's always been that worry of infiltration and misinformation and disinformation. So, and there are a lot of people within the community that dismisses a lot of this, not necessarily the videos, because they're intriguing, but they're also fascinating, but they're also not anything new. There have been releases like this. There have been encounter reports by pilots all the way back to 1947. There are pilots that have died chasing flying saucers. So the notion of pilots having encounters is not necessarily a new thing. This organization and, what their motivations are and how this stuff is being released and what has been the chain of command for release, because it's still sort of shady. It's sort of, it's not really through the Department of Defense. It is through Louis Elizondo, who was on this board, who formerly ran the ATIP, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, in the Department of Defense, which was largely created as sort of a vanity project through Bob Bigelow, the aerospace magnate, the billionaire. He encouraged, Senator Harry Reid of his state of Nevada to look into this and to help fund it. And Bigelow Aerospace and some of the other organizations that Bigelow had created throughout the 90s, such as NIDS and their involvement through MUFON. He has been one of those rich UFO geeks that has been definitely interested in the subject. But he has also had defense intelligence ties. So, let's if I may, let's focus on Bigelow, because you touched on him and he's fascinating. So I want people to understand the gravity of how this web works. So he is a billionaire. He's involved in building lots of aircraft, skunk ape works. If I'm wrong, tell me. But am I right? He actually, just one point, and then then I'll get you to come back, because this last point I want to make a holistic point. So the holistic point I want to make is this. Am I right in thinking that, given his background, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't mind at all, I want our listeners to understand it, but the point is that he said that aliens are here and they are amongst us, or a quote like that. He's been very positive. This is somebody who isn't just simply
a researcher. This is somebody who's very well respected in industry, who's involved in designing aircraft, who openly says aliens exist. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, he said that in a 60-minute interview last year, and he's certainly a believer. But we can't rest just on one person's opinion. And we also would like to know, all the secret stuff that he knows. He bought Skinwalker Ranch, and he has access to, he bought, MUFON files and MUFON cases, so, if he knows something the rest of us don't, we would like access to that information. That's what, scientific ufology is supposed to be, that, we can look at these cases, we can peer review, we can investigate these with other investigators to make sure there's no bias, but I think he has sat on a lot of stuff. And has he done so out of, just so that he knows, or is he connected to defense intelligence, which he certainly, it suggests that he has been, that, a lot of the stuff that he investigated throughout the 90s went to defense intelligence. And, when ATIP was in operation, a large chunk of their money was subcontracted out to Bigelow. So he's definitely a big player here. Whether he's, playing the intelligence game, if this is some sort of, misdirection, or if he knows stuff but it's not releasing it, all of this is still part of the exopolitical intrigue that we're having to wade through. But I think he definitely is somebody that people should pay attention to as far as this subject.
Well, go on. Sorry,
Mike again here quickly. You brought up a very interesting point about much of the evidence being, or so-called evidence, being easy to dismiss. And that's very true, as it is with many fields of study and research. I would point out that I particularly find the case of, like, the ATIP so-called Tic-Tac HUD AT flip video that was released, I particularly find that completely compelling. Now, either somebody is really trying to dupe me here with some fancy CGI that knows what they're doing, or that is totally legitimately not anything of any military from around this zip code or anything. Something incredible has been captured in that video, and like you say, that's certainly not the first time. So when you see evidence like that, or alleged evidence of something very unusual occurring, and you have the testimony of a man that's tasked with commanding a strike fighter squadron for the United States, something that's heavy, man. When you put those kinds of things together, I think that's very compelling. And that type of information, to me, is very much on the other end of the scale and very hard to dismiss. Do you think, in your somewhat reasonably well-informed opinion, that anybody would have any, and I'm not going to say anybody, by name or anything, but would anybody have any motivation to really falsify something like that in any way? Like, is there a motivation to trick me there?
Yeah, there's definitely motivation there, to obfuscate, some people have suggested that, that the whole ATIP idea, and there's been words that have changed, since the stories come out. It was advanced aerial threat, and then it was advanced aviation threat, then it was advanced aerial threat, and then it was advanced aerospace threat, It's like, which of those words are we looking at here? Some people have suggested that this is a way to further increase congressional military spending, because if we have a threat, then, it's So there's a possibility. Is it possible that these were faked? It's certainly possible. I think when you have eyewitness testimony, it becomes a little less likely. Ultimately, though, what we have videos and testimony, and we've always had videos and testimony throughout this subject. From presidents down. And I certainly don't want to be dismissive of anything. A lot of times, when you look into something and you ask a lot of questions and you really want to get the answers, that can be perceived as being negative or being a skeptic or a debunker. When I look at what's going on here with A-Tip and Tom DeLonge and these videos, and I ask questions, it's because I want more answers. It's not because I'm trying to dismiss it, and it can be frustrating, I'm sure, because we're dealing with intelligence apparatuses and things that are either classified or partially disclassified or who knows what, So it's I think the thing to do is to try to get these questions out there, is to try to get them answered, to recognize when something's not answered, to then ask why is something not answered. We definitely need to see the chain of evidence, because evidence is irrelevant if there's no chain of evidence. We should be able to track it from the pilot to being put into CNN's hands, and we should be able to know who had touched the piece of evidence all the way up till the time it was presented. So when we're trying to do our due diligence in researching these things and getting to the background, you have your believers that wholeheartedly just look at it and say, disclosure is here, and then you have your more skeptical people that say, this is nothing new. I think reality is somewhere in the middle, and I worry about, the connections to, Tom DeLonge's group, which, definitely is a money venture, but it's also an intelligence venture, and it's also connected to Bigelow and Defense Intelligence. So I have a lot of questions. I'm going to continue to ask questions, not because I want to, prove people wrong, but I want to know what's going on, Well, asking more questions is not is not dismissal. We should all be asking more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me, because we haven't got much time. There's a couple of points that people will want to know, and you mentioned again about Bigelow, and I was fascinated about the alien reference that he made. What also one of the big questions is that there's millions, literally millions of people across the world that claim to have been abducted by aliens. And, one of the questions has to be, do you think there's any validity to those stories, or any of them worth exploring, or would you dismiss them? Well,
as a researcher and an investigator, and I have been for 40 years, I've been, a member of MUFON. I've even been a member of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization going back to the late 70s, early 80s. I was one of their youngest members. So, I've had my hands in this subject for many decades. I'm open-minded, but I'm also an open-minded skeptic. For me, I want, as I've said before, I want more information, not just to believe. I want better evidence, not just, somebody's account of something. And, having looked at the subject over so many years, there's a lot of things that are definitely perplexing, that are definitely interesting. I myself have seen UFOs. Whether or not they're from another planet, I couldn't tell you, just by, mere observation. And my mere observation is not evidence of anything. It's just my account. But I think with, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind cases, with abductions, not everybody who claims to be, a starseed has had alien baby hybrids, but there are some really convincing cases out there, like Travis Walton or the Stanford encounter in '78, or Betty and Barney Hill. There's some of those classic cases that are really interesting, really intriguing, and worthy of consideration.
Were
these people abducted? I don't know.
Yeah, I would like very much to explore this topic again because we're almost out of time. But I'm really interested in what you think about Travis Walton and Betty and Barney Hill, and we could do with some background and exploring those. So maybe next time you come on, we can talk about that again. Michael, because we haven't got much time, really what I'm interested in is what's new for you? What have you got coming up? Is there anything you want to tell our listeners about?
Well, I do a lot of paranormal travel writing, not just UFOs, but pretty much I travel to interesting spots, ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, and I go to conferences and, I travel around with my family and I document locations. I will be hanging out with Travis Walton here
great.
in the fall. I'll be visiting Waverly Hill Sanatorium to investigate some ghosts, and there's a lot of ghost stuff I'm doing this year. I'll be hanging out with Stanton Friedman here in a few weeks, and a lot of these Richard Dolan and all these other people when I go to the Ozark conference here in a couple weeks. So maybe you can check back to me then. I'm gonna pick some of these people's brains and see what they think about all this.
That's excellent. Michael, that's superb, man. It's good to see you out there involved in the community and engaging the subject like you do. It's easy to tell that you have a great passion for the subject, and that's something that I commend you for. That you can tell it just by the way you speak. Really, well, you're welcome. And you've been such an excellent guest. I'm so sorry we've run out of time for this evening. But like Adam mentioned, I'm sure we'll have you on again if you'd be so kind to join us. And I understand you hope to join us next month when we welcome in Stan Gordon to talk about the Kecksburg incident also. So listeners will want to make sure to catch you then as well. Well, Michael.
Yeah. I hung out with him recently. Yeah, it'd be good to talk to him on the radio again.
Well, yes, and he's certainly a wealth of knowledge as well as yourself. And once again, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Good to talk to you guys.
Well, it was a great experience for everyone. And be sure to tune in next week as we welcome in the Paranormal MD, Mary Marshall. Good night, Internet.